Chapter 3. I screamed. Screamed and screamed till I lost track of time. Screamed till my throat bled. And I ran the whole time. Well, as much as I could. There's only so much more running you can do after you lock yourself in your room. The blood in the back of my mouth drizzled down my throat, nearly down the wrong pipe. I spent a few minutes hacking and coughing until I spat out a splatter of red on the hardwood floor. I kept coughing because it felt like I had more blood. In actuality, I was probably just making my throat bleed more. I trotted myself to my bathroom sink, which for the life of me felt like dragging dead weight with my front hooves, until I finally let myself slump over the counter and breathe. The cool hardtop was a stark contrast to the heat in my cheeks and the heavy beat of my heart. I could almost hear it reverberate in the fixtures and echo through the pipes. It wouldn't have surprised me. Nothing at that point would, or could, I don't think. Simply for the fact that I wouldn't have been able to focus on it long enough to be surprised. I spat out a little bit more blood and passed out. I was mildly aware of the presence of someone else in the room as my consciousness faded. Waking up from passing out is rather different than waking up in the morning. After you sleep, if you're anything like me, you simply wake up. There's no transition. It's just a switch going off in your head. Nothing special. Returning to consciousness from fainting, however, is a slow, almost arduous process. Your mind tries to protect itself, to keep you unconscious and safe from whatever external stimuli that induced your lapse in consciousness. It's more like a struggle to make yourself aware of everything around you. Light fades in and out, and sound comes in snippets as your ability to process it sways back and forth. She okay? Hell was she screaming about? Found her. On the floor? Really? My perception of the room seemed to come in a jumbled mess, like being shown one piece of a jigsaw puzzle at a time. I saw a lamp, something familiar that was pink, a hoof, some bright light, and finally, when I could see more than 3 inches of space surrounded by blur, I focused on the rather confused face of Daisy. Fortunately or no, my ability to process noise also seemed to return in full. What the hell were you doing? You ran right past me, screaming like you? Said a familiar and snarky voice behind me. I knew it, but didn't necessarily want to tilt my head to confirm my suspicions. I don't scream like that all the time, Daisy pouted. Unfortunately, the position I was in was extremely uncomfortable, so I rolled over and looked up. Hello, Philharmonica. Why are you in my house? Octavia tilted her head in concern, pouting slightly. She offered a hoof to help me up. I begrudgingly accepted, not wanting to seem weak, and brought myself to my hooves. I felt for a moment that I might need the help again, as my body swayed uncertainly, but I steadied myself, and made a point to stand straight. Oh, come on, Rose. You run screaming through the streets like a mad mare, and you expect no pony to be concerned about you? Of course I wanted to make sure you were okay, she said, sounding slightly hurt. Right. I'm sorry. Thank you. Look, I'm not even entirely sure what just happened, and I could hardly explain it to you. I'm just still a little freaked out, and I seem to remember coughing up blood at some point, so forgive me if I seem a little edgy. I apologized half-heartedly, even if I didn't mean it. She gave me a look that I didn't quite recognize. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were on something. That sounds almost word for word like a bad acid trip. Part of me wanted to ask how she knew, but the other part wanted to sleep. I turned around to find a place to sit and was reminded of Daisy's presence. She looked more than a little freaked out. Forget about me. Are you okay, Daisy? Okay? Okay? Of course I'm not okay! You come tearing through the door, screaming your head off like you just lost a limb, and run straight into your room, which doesn't actually lock, by the way. Been meaning to tell you that. And when you cough up a bunch of blood and pass out all over your bathroom sink, did you even see me at all when you ran in here? I was right there when you fell over. I thought you were dead or something. Can you believe? She rambled on in frustration, and I turned to the gray cellist for a more concise answer. Don't look at me. She started screaming a little after you stopped. There were a few ponies that were more than concerned by you running through town, but so many of them are used to her. She gestured to a still rambling Daisy. That quite a few ponies lost interest. You almost ran a hole right through me, though, so I felt mildly obliged to ensure you weren't possessed or high. I felt a slight smirk cross my face as I threw myself onto my couch. Appreciate it. I sank into the cushions, and was met with the irking sensation that I was missing something. She herself took a seat on the opposite end and asked, So, what exactly happened? I thought about my answer. Hard. I wasn't even entirely sure what did happen. I just knew some thing yelled at me. Or rather thought. Was it even a yell? Part of me felt like I saw something, but the only thing I could remember with any clarity was having a conversation with Ditzy. Honestly, I don't remember any details. I was talking to Ditzy and something happened. I don't know what. That sensation surfaced again. I felt a little cold. Almost. And empty. She tilted her head to look at me. Does it have anything to do with what happened at Princess Twilight's this morning? I think so. That was weird. Why was my speech slurred? Octavia said something else, but I didn't hear it. It was at that point that I realized what I was missing. All the blood had rushed out of my head. Hello again, sleep. After the second time waking up and passing out, I was starting to get tired of it. No pun intended. This time, however, I awoke to unfamiliar surroundings. Well, unfamiliar in that I didn't recognize them right away. Hospitals are a familiar setting to almost any pony, for one reason or another. This time, I woke slightly faster. Sound and light didn't cut out as frequently, and I quickly grasped the conversation going on around me. Or at least nearby. All of the other ponies in the room were standing on the other side of a curtain, chatting morosely about some pony's condition. I prayed it wasn't me. And then I noticed the silhouette of another pony in the neighboring bed. A couple of doctors spoke in low tones, but I caught phrases like psychosis and self-harm. Celestia knows why they put me in a room next to him. I laid back down and was getting ready to fall back asleep when the doctors on the other side of the curtain turned and started to move towards me. My first impression is that they wanted to speak to me. My second impression was that there was something very wrong. It took me a moment to realize what it was. I could tell that there were two of them. They turned to each other and made quiet comments as they walked. Maybe it was the slow, deliberate pace with which they approached me. Or was it the fact that they didn't seem to be getting closer? My second idea was quickly dispelled by one of them reaching for the edge of the curtain, ready to draw it back. It was then that I realized what was wrong with them. Their shadows. Their voices. There was only one set of hooves between the two. I shrank back into my bed as far as I could, trying to pull the covers over me. But Celestia be damned hospital corners. The sheets wouldn't give. After I heard the curtain rustle slightly, I froze and turned my head slowly to watch the fabric draw back on the metal bar holding it up. It was an agonizingly slow process. I stared at their wrong hooves, their wrong heads talking to each other, the hoof reaching for the curtain even as all four of the hooves stayed in place on the ground. Then with a snap, the curtain drew back, revealing one absolutely normal, ordinary doctor. I almost jumped out of bed. Whether to hug him or dive for the window, I wasn't sure. He cut right to the chase, seemingly ignorant to my distressed state. Well, Miss Roseluck, you seem to be a little worse for wear, but nothing awful. There was some slight bleeding in the back of your throat, which we patched. You may not have noticed it yet, but you're going to experience some itching and a scratching sensation back there. Usually we don't see these kinds of throat injuries outside of metal singers. Metal? I whispered, thinking that might be safer. It wasn't. Hurt like hell. Oh yes, You're going to want to drink plenty of lemon juice, in small doses of course, and lots of water. I also strongly advise against whispering, as you've just experienced. All of the damage is to your vocal cords, and whispering constricts them. It's like squeezing a paper cut. Try to stick to your normal speaking voice. Nothing more, nothing less, he explained. Now, the good news is you didn't pass out thanks to any kind of blood loss. That seemed to be a worry of that Daisy friend of yours. After she settled down, of course. But you put your body under a great deal of stress very quickly, and changed gears rather hard. Plus, there's a sort of a checklist of things to do and not to do after you pass out, and throwing yourself at your furniture and talking with blood in your stomach aren't on the to-do list. He chuckled, amused by his own joke. I flopped back in bed and stared at the ceiling. Well, that was fun, I grumbled. My throat itched like crazy, and talking was rather sore. Of course, you could always not talk. I do advise that one. I gave him a look, and he smiled at me. Apparently he thought himself a comedian. So, where are my friends? He nodded behind him. Right outside. I wanted to talk to you myself to make sure you didn't do any more damage to your vocal cords in the course of normal conversation. I'll let them in. Just in a moment, if you like. That sounds good. Hey, Doc, I added after a brief pause. He turned around and was about to walk back out of the room. Yes? What's with the patient next to me anyway? Do I need to be worried? He looked at me quizzically, then at the other bed in the room. Who? I looked where he was looking. Even though I couldn't see the bed, I could see the shadow it cast. Empty. I turned back to my doctor, who smiled gently at me. Miss Rose, you may just need some time to relax. Obviously something today has stressed you a great deal. It may be prudent to find a work schedule that is a little less stressful. Maybe take some time off. Let your voice heal. I nodded, putting the thought of the shadows behind the curtain in the back of my mind. Laying my head back against the pillow, I decided to let myself fall asleep. Naturally this time.